Thank you for joining us here on another edition of The Bridge. This is an engagement platform created by the Students on Ice Foundation. Inuk and myself are here to discuss the integration of Indigenous knowledge with science-based research. My name is Kathleen Matari. I was born in Inuvik, Northwest Territories in the Inuvialuit settlement region in the Western Arctic Canada. And I'm still living here, born and raised, living here. And my passion is to see a better connection between two specific knowledge sets, that of traditional knowledge, or IQ as some people know, or Inuit knowledge, and science as a general field, specifically here, mostly to do with ecosystem and wildlife management. And my passion for wildlife management came from my mother, who is Inuvialuit from this region, and my father, who is a researcher who came to Inuvik to do research and was eventually hired by the Inuvialuit wildlife management groups to set up a wildlife management system. So that has transpired to me today, being interested and passionate about seeing these two specific knowledge sets equally utilized and recognized and credited. And we'll speak more to that in a little bit. And now I'll let Inuk introduce herself.
Thanks, Kate. Hi, everyone. I'm Inuk, or Sudlovenick, and I'm coming to you today from Winnipeg. I'm not from Winnipeg though. So I'm from Nunavut. My parents are both from Resolute Bay, and I grew up in Pawnee and Iqaluit. And I'm in Winnipeg for my PhD, and I'm studying beluga health in Nunavut and Northwest Territories. Actually, that's where I met Kate for the first time, was in Northwest Territories when I was there as a summer student doing beluga work. So Kate and I actually go way back. Yeah, we're happy to be here with you today. But we have some questions that we're going to go through, and we'll just go through them with you guys in the next 40 minutes to an hour. But first, since this is a Students on Ice event, Kate, how did you get involved with Students on Ice?
Yes, I've known about Students on Ice in my region for many years without being involved. I saw the organization equip a lot of people, mostly youth, with amazing opportunities of various research. And my first experience with Students on Ice was actually with the Canada C3 expedition that they had done in 2017. I joined on the Paulituk NWT to Tuktoyaktuk NWT leg. Mm-hmm. So that was my personal experience with Students on Ice. And how about for yourself, Inuk? What was your experience with Students on Ice and the alumni programs and things like that?
Yeah, I feel like anybody who grew up in the territories knows about Students on Ice, knows somebody that did it. And my sister did it, I don't know, geez, it was a long time ago, like 2014 or 15, and she did the Antarctic one. And I seen the ships come in to Iqaluit. There was one year they tried to come in, but there's too much ice. So they were thinking about choppering in the participants to there, but then they didn't. Mm-hmm. So they got Coast Guard to lead them and break through the ice to get to the ship so that they can go. And we're all watching it what's happening? Yeah. So cool. Yeah. But I joined 2018 summer expedition as staff. At this point, I was halfway through my master's, and they were like, do you want to go on the ship? And I was like, okay, sure. So yeah, we did the auto-op program, and then we started in Greenland, and then we were supposed to end in Resolute, but we couldn't because of ice. So we ended in back in Greenland. So we went all the way to like Pond Inlet, and then we turned around. So they were like, okay, we can't go to Resolute, so we're just gonna go back to Greenland. We're like, okay, sure. There's like always ice or always wind or always something. So yeah, we spent, I think it was like 10 days on board. And after that, there was a couple alumni programs that I did. One of them was Arctic Circle Conference, which is in Iceland every year. And I went part of a delegation. Yeah, it was cool. There was like, I got to meet other Inuk alum that I haven't met before. So like people from Nunavik. There was a girl from Norway, Aurora, and some Americans. So it was really cool. And we SOI had a booth and a talk, so it was really cool. And then I was on another panel at some point in the last year. So I really like the alumni programs because you get to meet more alum that you would have never met otherwise. So it was it's just anybody who grew up in the North has 100% heard about Students on Ice. Like it's inevitable.
That's true.
So so that's how I got involved with SOI.
Actually, I wouldn't mind to know how you got involved with researching belugas. Like you just explained your time with Students on Ice and with researching belugas, because I remember you worked on seals as well. Can you kind of explain a bit of your research path?
Yeah. So how I ended up with beluga, it started, so I did my undergrad in marine biology. In that first summer after first year, I was working with DFO in Iqaluit, and my boss there, she was trying to get me to like really like marine biology. She's like, you know what, let's send you to Northwest Territories and work on beluga. I was like, okay. So she asked Lisa, the Beluga Research team lead, for those that don't know, and they sent me there. I had no idea what I was getting into. I was like, okay, I'll go NWT and look at beluga. That sounds fun. And then I got to NWT, and then they put us on a boat right away. And then they're like, okay, you're going up to East Whitefish. And I was like, okay, that sounds fun. And I think it was just Lisa and Danny at the time on the boat who drove us up. And then we met you at the camp, I think.
Hendrickson. I hadn't gone across to East Whitefish, but I was at Hendrickson. So you guys must have come across.
Yeah. And then I think so we spent, I think I only spent like 5 or 7 days at East Whitefish. And man, that region, your region is so different from Baffin. Like I was not used to all the biting flies and the low bush and like just how much driftwood there was everywhere. And I was like, what is this place? It was so cool.
I thought you were gonna say about the water or whatever. It's like, no, the bushes and the wood.
Yeah, it was hot too. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm dying and getting chewed up. So that was what? You
can be driven insane.
Yeah, I've never seen so many bugs as I have there. Like it's nuts. But that was my first exposure to marine mammal research, and I was like, I kind of like this, even though there's crazy amount of bugs everywhere. And everyone there made me feel so welcome, like Clara Day, and there were some hunters I met from Tuktoyaktuk, and so it was really nice. And then that kind of just like sealed the deal. First year, I was like, okay, I know what I'm doing for the rest of my life is marine mammal work.
Wow, that's a really great testament to just being able to have those opportunities to go out. And imagine if you never had the opportunity, things might have been a lot different.
100%. Because like, how did you get into DFO and marine mammal stuff?
They're actually Lisa Lassetto, who you just mentioned. also mentored me through through the Beluga Research Program that's done here in our region. I have to go back many years, even before I was born. Wildlife managers and stakeholders in our area realized the importance of monitoring beluga health. Why beluga? Why not, some other animal? Beluga is a really great species to study as a good ecosystem indicator. So if something was awry, different, concerning with the ecosystem or environment, we will most likely see that reflected in beluga. And what makes it doubly important is we depend on beluga blubber and mussel, which is what we call makdak, and mipgu, and its oil, which we call okra. And so we depend on it and we eat it. That's something that we look forward to harvesting every summer. So it was the importance of it being our subsistence, and then also it being a really great indicator of the ecosystem. Those two things created the monitoring program, where samples are taken from the whales that we hunt to eat. The hunters and the harvesters voluntarily give time for researchers and community members who have been hired as monitors to collect samples. And then we look at that and we're able to assess the health of the beluga. So that program is the longest running beluga monitoring program in the world. And we're very proud of that, simply because we know the power of a strong data set, and we continue collecting samples year in, year out. And we do that with partnerships between the federal government and the user groups. So specifically here, Department of Fisheries and Oceans, with a co-management committee called Fisheries Joint Management Committee, which is composed of people from our region and Canada members who speak with the Minister of Fisheries and many other people to ensure that the marine mammals are managed properly here, excuse me, by us as harvesters and local people, but also for data for fisheries and oceans, things like that. So that program had been ongoing. So I had known about the program. My father knew about it. He worked with the Wildlife Co-Management Board called Joint Secretariat that worked with the Fisheries Joint Management Committee. And so of course this was their program. And so I had known about it. And when Lisa Laceto had offered me the opportunity to go to Hendrickson Island, which is in Cook-Mallet Bay, which is just directly outside of Tuktoyaktuk, Northwest Territories, where the population that we harvest from, they generally come into that area almost on the dot July 1st and spend the entire month calving. And so we generally don't hunt the females because they could be pregnant or they could be raising young. And we want to, it's part of our Enooyaq bylaws to not hunt those, so that we can see the preservation of the whales year in, year out. But our people, without those bylaws even being in place, our people have learned from traditional knowledge to identify male belugas and hunt male belugas. And so they can tell merely by size. Females generally don't grow exceeding 12, 14 feet. And males can exceed that, going 18, 20 feet. So you can actually tell by size what whale you're hunting. And we do that as a preservation bylaw that we voluntarily abide by, so that we can see whales around for many generations. And so when I had the opportunity to work at Hendrickson Island as a summer student, I took that, and then I became involved in different aspects of it. The program, it's a really neat, flexible program that can change each year to different needs. And so some years it's a very big science camp, and there's different researchers that are in to study different areas of the beluga. or some years it's scaled back down for whatever reason. It's maybe just the monitors that are local people that are hired. I've been a part of both a big science camp and a smaller, your basic bread and meat of the program without any added extras. And so with that, it really opened my eyes to wildlife management, how important the ecosystem is. And so when I had that exposure, it put kind of opened the door up with Department of Fisheries and Oceans, and a position opened up here in my hometown called Fisheries Management Technician. And so that's what I am now. And so I help user groups here manage important fisheries, and that takes all shapes and forms. I could be meeting with the public, ensuring that they get their commercial fishing license, or I could be going out in the field and ensuring that samples are collected properly so that when we send them out, they're able to get analyzed. Here's one little tidbit of information, especially for students that are looking to have a career in science. When you're collecting samples, it's very important that you collect samples, of course, that's almost common knowledge. But what's second to that is how it's collected. And when you realize the price tag that goes on the samples that you're taking, you want to really make sure that they're taken properly, because that's not, the cost is not just in collecting samples, the cost is also analyzing them. And then when you get the results, bringing those results back. So it's just a really neat way to look at it. So my job, sometimes I have to ensure that samples are collected properly. And then there's a lot of relaying results back. Maybe Inu and I can speak to some things about how to relay results back effectively later on. So my job is a lot of that, a lot of communication, and a lot of partnering. There's we work as partners. There's for wildlife ecosystem, whatever, it cannot be properly managed unless you have partners that all buy into it and work at it. And so us at Fisheries and Oceans, we do our part, and then we work with local harvesters, stakeholder groups, our leaders, as they partner with us. And that's how we get things off the ground. And then we start seeing, long-term monitoring data sets, things like that. So those are some of the successes of that.
Yeah. Kate, actually, I have a question, because most people probably don't know that, but you did your schooling in the States, right?
Correct.
So you got your DFO job after you came back from, like, you said you had a summer job with DFO during?
Yes. Correct. Yes. So I did my undergrad in Pensacola, Florida, where I got my biology degree. And then while I was doing those 4 years, I would come back to Inuvik, and I was hired by the Aurora Research Institute as a summer student for the 3 summers in between my undergrad. And it was there as a summer student that I was given many opportunities to take part in different field work, things like that. And actually, right even from there, I was, just a teenager. From there is when I started realizing that there aren't a lot of women in science, but at the time there was starting to be more and more women. And that's the general topic of today is women in science. And so that first impression of, I worked with a lot of women in science actually, and it almost gave me a false ideology, because then I was then told how underrepresented women can be in science. But personally, in my own experience and opinion, I didn't see that, and I wasn't treated particularly different. I was, and this is what I wanted to share with our audience too, is as women in science, or just generally anybody that is interested in science, wants to pursue a career, understand that you have something very particular and special to bring to the table, and that shouldn't be deterred by other people around you that are telling you you shouldn't be here. That those two things don't go together. I never had that experience, but if I were to encounter somebody that just merely looked at me and made a judgment that, oh no, they don't belong here, that's totally false. You have something very, special and something that only you can contribute. And that's what was instilled in me. I didn't know what I could bring to the table, but many people told me, my mentors, my parents told me along the way that, okay, you're born and raised in this area, you're working in science. If you see anything that maybe isn't being done according to like the traditional values we taught you, you can speak up about that and see the program maybe get improved with your input. And so that's a bit of my experience. Have you had any experience like that, Inu, with women in science and barriers, or your experience as yourself emerging into this field?
Yeah, I mean, I feel really lucky, just like you. Like I feel like both of our experiences, we were really lucky to meet our mentors early on.
Yeah.
So that first year summer student job during my undergrad, I met Zoya Martin, she used to be head of science at DFO in Nunavut. She recently moved to GN, Government Nunavut, but she's been my mentor ever since I went back to school in my undergrad. So that's 4, 5, 6, 8 years ago now. Yeah. Yeah. So she's been my mentor, and she is like unapologetically will address something if it's not right. She's taught me how to like address any issues if there are any issues, and how to I guess speak up. So I feel really lucky that I had her as a mentor, and she's still currently my mentor. Like I'll go see her every Christmas and every summer when I go back home. So it's just like I feel so lucky. So I mean, she provided a lot of opportunities. So like, I mean, I know there's definitely barriers. I think the first barrier is getting between high school and university.
Yeah.
That's it. That's the biggest barrier right now. And there's more and more Inuit going to post-secondary. But it's definitely not a draw. Like in Nunavut, it's just not people. It's hard to move down south where it's like it's just so different. Like the language is different, the community size is different. Getting to the south is hard. Like it would take me 2 days to like get from Iqaluit to Guelph because it was just so like long. So I think that was the biggest barrier, and I definitely took my time. Like after high school, I went to military college for 2 years, and I was like, I don't like this. And then I went back home for a year to think about like what I wanted to do. And so I went back and did my undergrad. I was like most people going in their undergrad are like 18, 19. And when I went back in, I was 21, which is not that much older, but it was enough to be like, okay, I need friends. So yeah, I feel like it's not been a straightforward path. And I feel like some of the barriers they weren't as big as they could have been, considering I had a mentor and financial assistance from the government. So it was, yeah.
That's so neat. And the years that we've known each other, I've always admired your work ethic, and I see that you understand the need for the research that you do, but you also respect the land and the people that you want to go work with. I know you don't go into something like this has to be studied, I'm going to do what I have to do. It's like, no, there's a people group, and I think you did your work up in Nunavut, there's there's people in these communities that actually know more about this than I do. How about, you know, we spend more time with them? So can you talk a little bit about how your personal experience with why incorporating Indigenous knowledge, or I say here traditional knowledge or Inuit knowledge, with science-based research, and you know why that's important?
Yeah, man, that question, every time somebody asks me that, I'm like, this could be so long. There's just so many different ways to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it boils down to just spending time there. But also I should acknowledge that like I grew up there.
Sure.
So I have like an inherent understanding of just like, I know the language and I know how to talk to people. So like I have a big leg up compared to like someone from the South going up. But I think the biggest thing for sure is just spending time. So like I'm working in a new community now that I haven't worked in before. And so I've just gone in and just like spent a week there just to like meet people and just be like, hey, hi, I'm looking to work with Beluga here, and I just wanted to meet everybody and see if there's interest. And there's lots of different ways to incorporate knowledge. Nunavut, we call it IQ. And like there's just so many ways, and it depends. Each project has a different way of doing it, but it's also not like there's some people who would just hire like a bear monitor and be like, that's incorporating Inuit knowledge, and you're like, no, it's not. So the way I like to do it is even before research, doing like pre-research consultation. And I know some it's hard to find money to do that, to go in and do pre-research consultation, but it's an investment that's super worth it, I found. And it'll just benefit you and everybody in the long run. So just going in and chat to people and see if there's interest or if there's already existing concerns that could help steer the research that would make it applicable. And then from there, there's so many things you could do. You could do like interviews, individual group interviews, but I think the question was why incorporate Indigenous knowledge. I think that was a question. I feel like I'm like, okay.
Yeah, it's all connected, and it'd be neat to hear from you why it's important to incorporate Indigenous knowledge. I mean, we could easily just go in and collect data on a purely physical level, but why is it important to include Indigenous knowledge in this particular field?
Yeah, definitely. I think we're speaking from like marine mammal side mostly, but in any field really incorporating Indigenous knowledge, Inuit knowledge, it enriches the work and makes it more meaningful and impactful. Especially like in both of our regions, if you're not incorporating Inuit knowledge, Inuk Valley knowledge, the project definitely suffers, because you go into the community and like you could go straight after your field season, like you get off the commercial flight, you get on your charter and you're gone. And if you have a bad field season, that's it. Like that's we can't do anything for you. Sorry that happened. But when you're incorporating Inuit knowledge, when people know what you're doing, they're invested, they know you as a person as well as a researcher, then they'll be like, oh, that you had a bad field season, let's see what we can do. So it's when people care about your project, they care about you as a person, then your project's going to be better for it. And I'm sure you have lots of examples too, or like how it's done in the West.
And a lot of what you said really touches on what I see here. I see that in order for you have two knowledge sets, the IQ, Indigenous knowledge, traditional knowledge, and then you have a knowledge set that's very textbook and something you could study from a lecture or things like that. So specifically, we're talking about science here. So there's these two knowledge sets, and this is what I can hear you saying too, Inu, is that if only one side is done, it's almost like you're missing half of your work. You know, how can you have a robust, impactful paper or research or whatever when only one side has been studied? And so I don't even look at like, how should these two incorporate each other? It's actually, they're two knowledge sets that need to be equally studied, recognized, credited. The challenge, though, is when you have an expert in a certain field trying to be an expert in another field, you're going to have interpretation problems, you're going to have translation problems, and that's the same. It's the same if I were to take, I know of some people here that if I were to literally to take them from Enooyaq and put them anywhere in the Mackenzie Delta, they will survive and they will make a living and they will make their way home, whatever. They know the land, they know the maze of the Delta, they know the weather systems, things like that. I would never expect them, I would never put them in a lab and say, you know, can you please analyze these liver samples or whatever. I would never do that. So I would never expect a researcher in science and put them in the Mackenzie Delta and say, all right, okay, figure this out and hope you survive. That those two, you just wouldn't, you'd never approach it like that. And so why would we do that in our research? And that's why it's so important that these two knowledge sets are fully studied. And you can do a lit study on traditional knowledge. It just doesn't look the same. You can't go and pull off a textbook, you know, on a library shelf. It takes what Inu said, time, effort, relationships with people. And with the Inuit people, where the knowledge that we hold is the main way that knowledge has been passed down is orally. And so there's not written books. Our people weren't prolific writers and wrote books. And that's not to say that isn't happening now. There's a lot of authors now that are budding and things like that, but I'm talking about a long time ago. And so that's been something I've been noticing, and certainly not talking down on anybody. I think it's just a matter of educating ourselves and understanding. I've also noticed that there's challenges with Indigenous knowledge and science kind of blending, but a lot of that can be relieved when you utilize the various groups in the community that you're working in. A lot of the communities actually have leaders who lead various committees that are specifically there to, well, protect their land, but also work with somebody that's coming from outside who might want to work in their area. And what we do in our region here is anybody that wants to come work in the area, we meet with them and we see how our priorities can align, and then we can co-design work. And so when you have that co-design happening right from the very beginning, all the way through the research, right to results, analyzing your results, right through to communication, and then right through to the end wrap up. And when you co-design something, usually there's an end goal, and there you're already set up for success. You have an objective, you have an end goal, and you're not seeing something open-ended, unfinished, unrecognizable because you designed it from the very beginning. Is that something that you did with your research, Inu, this co-design ideology?
Yeah. So currently now for PhD research, we did co-design our current methodologies, and we're still, so we already co-designed and figured out the best way to do like the sample collections, which is very similar to what you guys do in the West.
Yeah.
So we talk with them and we figure out how to do all the sample collections. We couldn't go up this year, so they did it from the ground up. Like we didn't even have to go up, they just did it, and we're like, okay, like this is great. They like, yeah, we just talked through on the phone. We shared some videos, and then they went out and collected samples, which was amazing. And now we're currently in the process of trying to figure out how best we can do our interviews. So we're right now I'm looking at what already exists, like what interviews were done, because as we know, what was it called? Research fatigue in communities is very real of people coming in and like asking questions and then leaving, and then another research group coming in and asking the same questions, and people were like, man, we just answered these. So it's that first step of finding out what was already done is very important. And I'm lucky enough that my team in Althea, they have been heavily involved in the past research on IQ. So that kind of, I guess, this kind of bleeds into one of the audience questions naturally. I think we answered most of it already, but it was, do you have any input on opening up the lines of communication between stakeholder groups? It's hard sometimes knowing that the best way to carry out research. It's hard sometimes knowing the best way to carry out research when there seems to be such a lack of communication between groups. And the groups they're talking about is academia, Indigenous government, and public groups. So I think we kind of answered that question a bit already. But I quickly wanted to just say that this sounds like someone from academia, maybe someone doing their master's or something. And I know it can be disheartening sometimes, especially when you're reaching out to HTOs. It's, the important thing to remember is that these HTOs have a lot going on. Like you're not the only research group going in, asking for a letter or an update, or like there's a lot going on. So for this question, I would just say, just be patient. It takes time. And how I usually, like in the West, you guys have it all figured out, I feel like, so you can answer this question really well. But how I'm doing it now is just once in a while, I'll send an email to all the groups or a call with everybody and just be like, hey, here's what's going on. But like you guys in the West, it's like, it feels like an oiled machine. So I feel like you could answer this question better.
It's so great to hear your opinion on that, like, and your personal experience with that. Honestly, it's we still definitely face challenges here, but there are certain regimes that are in place that you can follow, almost protocols, and again, that takes buy-in from the committees and the researchers, things like that. And yeah, and I think this is a really good topic to end on. I'll take kind of what Inuk said and just conclude this question on communication. And if there are systemic issues with communication, things like that, just understand that yourself as a researcher, you have an incredibly full plate as it is trying to do your research, that it's not your mandate or job to try to fix the systemic issues with communication between these various organizations. But certainly understand that you don't need to reinvent the wheel with communication, but rather you can utilize the vehicles that are currently in place. And that looks different for every single community. Like as Inuk said, they do things differently community by community. So she has adapted her way of doing things to better meet how the community does things. Maybe just a drop-in email, a drop-in call. Some organizations, they love newsletters, they love posters. They don't mind meeting with people one-on-one and letting them know some information. It just depends on who you're working with. So I'm giving this broad question a very broad answer, but hopefully something that people can take with them as they endeavor into whatever research that they're choosing to do. Thank you so much, Inuk, for taking this time and to speak with myself and both of us just have a good conversation about the many different things. And I really hope that it benefits our audience. And we'd like to thank those that are listening for joining Inuk and myself with the bridge on this session on traditional knowledge, women in science, communication. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Kate.